Hello everyone. Today I am going to explain you about hierarchical methods. In this, we have contents according to hierarchical methods, agglomerative hierarchical clustering method, divisive hierarchical clustering method, and distance measures in algorithmic methods. First, what are hierarchical methods? A hierarchical clustering method works by grouping data objects into hierarchy or tree of clusters. Hierarchical clustering begins by treating every data point as a separate cluster. Then it repeatedly executes the subsequent steps. First, identify the two clusters which can be closest together and then merge the two maximum comparable clusters. We need to continue this step until all the clusters are merged together, and last, the aim is to produce hierarchical series of nested clusters. Agglomerative hierarchical clustering method. Now it uses a bottom-up strategy. It typically starts by letting each object form its own cluster and iteratively merges clusters into larger and larger clusters until all objects in the cluster or certain termination conditions are satisfied. The single cluster becomes the hierarchy's root. For the merging step, it finds the two clusters that are closest to each other and combines the two to form one cluster. Because two clusters are merged per iteration, where each cluster contains at least one object, and agglomerative method requires at most n iteration. The algorithm for agglomerative clustering is: first calculate the similarity of one cluster with all other clusters, then consider every data point as an individual cluster, merge the cluster which are highly similar to close, and then recalculate the proximity matrix of each cluster. Second, divisive hierarchical clustering method. It is quite opposite to agglomerative as it employs top-down strategy. It starts by placing all objects in one cluster, which is hierarchy's root. It then divides the root into several small subclusters and recursively partitions those clusters into smaller ones. The partitioning process continues until each cluster at the lowest level is coherent enough, either containing only one object or the objects within the cluster are sufficiently similar to each other. In either agglomerative or divisive, a user can specify the desired number of clusters as the termination condition. Distance measures in algorithmic methods, whether using an agglomerative method or a divisive method. A core need is to measure the distance between two clusters, where each cluster is generally a set of objects. Now there are four different types of distance which are used as minimum distance, maximum distance, mean distance, and average distance. They are also known as linkage measures. Now when an algorithm uses minimum distance to measure distance between clusters, it is sometimes called as nearest neighbor clustering algorithm. An agglomerative hierarchical clustering algorithm that uses the minimum distance measure is also called as a minimal spanning tree, where a spanning tree of a graph is a tree that connects all vertices, and a minimal spanning tree is one with least sum of edge weights. When an algorithm uses a maximum distance to measure a distance between clusters, it is sometimes called a farthest neighbor clustering algorithm. Thank you.